Okay, the NRL is reportedly interested in bringing in a draft system, much like the North American leagues. Now, ironically, the current salary cap is actually structured to work alongside a draft system, very similar to the AFL. The problem is it was defeated in court and challenged, and another issue is the administrative and structures that currently are in place within the sport, within the game in Australia. I'm not sure the clubs are going to agree to it just as a proposal. The infrastructure that's in place is that the clubs develop their players through the youth system, through their catchment areas, through their affiliate clubs that come under those catchment areas, and then they bring the players into first grade. Some teams like Penrith and Gold Coast have better youth systems than others. The West Tigers are known to redevelop the youth talent and then lose the youth talent to other teams. And in order for a draft system to work effectively, it's going to have to go above the NRL. It's going to have to go to the Australian Rugby League Commission to grow the sport at that reserve grade kind of level and state and territory level like the AFL has done in order for it to work. Because how many players can the hardcore NRL fans, and I'm talking fans that have far more knowledge on the game than I do, who are far more, bigger bookworms than I, how many players can you name that have come through at some point they have played some junior football in Western Australia, South Australia, and the state of Victoria? How many can you name? How many have played in the NRL or are currently in the NRL system? And for all the success that the Melbourne Storm have had, okay, where is the growth of the game in the state of Victoria? And we've had NRL teams in Adelaide and Perth. Where is that legacy? Even though teams aren't there now, and while State of Origin is taken to these locations in COVID notwithstanding as the neutral venue, and crowds are really, really good, and then the NRL in regular season also takes games on the road to territories and states outside of the traditional areas, the game isn't played at a high enough standard really to have a draft system that is truly going to work. And to call itself the NRL, the National Rugby League, is a misnomer. It's played on the East Coast, let's be honest, and New Zealand. The AFL has won that structural battle because they decided, and the teams got on board with their draft system. All parties got on board because each state and territory has a very strong competitive state and territory leagues. I actually watched some of the Northern Territory League play. It's actually kind of quite entertaining to watch that level below the AFL. Tasmania produces so many good players that end up playing in the AFL. Primarily, and yeah, Tasmania has that history with Aussie rules, but there are so many players from Tassie playing in the AFL. How would a draft system work as well? Because obviously some of the best Super League players come over to the NRL and have done for about 20 odd years to ply their trade, and pre-Super League days as well. Some great players who played in the UK have come over and played obviously in Australia. How would that work? Would the draft system also encompass the best young talent coming through in England and France, for example? Because now we've got the rise of Catalan and the rise of Toulouse as well. And how would that work with the Super League, Championship and League One over here in the UK? How would that work? Because I'm comparing this to the NHL in North America, where some of the best talent that plays in the NHL right now has been developed by European leagues. And if you follow this channel long enough, obviously you would have heard of Liam Kirk, if you followed this channel. And if you actually have a passing interest in the NHL, I know this is a rugby league video, Liam Kirk, British-born player, British-trained player, well, English, to be fair, because we've had British registered players who've spent time over here or born here who may represent Canada at international level, but he's the first through and through English player, at least. Tony Hand, obviously, you could argue went to an Oilers training camp and was undrafted, but and is now in the Arizona system. And the NHL has a broad draft policy, be it from professional, junior, and collegiate ranks, so university level. Other draft systems, such as Major League Baseball, great minor league system in the US for baseball. For all its flaws as a sport, over there with the Major League Baseball, great minor and junior league system. Doesn't necessarily rely on the collegiate system. The minor league system, almost every state has a minor league affiliate or a minor league team of the Major League Baseball franchise or links to Major League Baseball, where the player base can develop and can be drafted from. Even Major League Rugby in America and Canada has now got a draft system. So it is interesting. Each draft system is different, but there are a lot of logistical challenges ahead. You'll have to get the Players Association on board. I think it has to come from the Australian Rugby League Commission, not the NRL, because there's got to be a lot of administrative structural changes made. You've got to get the clubs on board, you've got to get the players on board, the current player base. Fans as well need to have a say in this, I think, in some way, shape or form. And from what I'm seeing online with responses to the NRL considering this, a lot of fans are not necessarily in favour. And another concern I have would encourage tanking, deliberately losing or playing badly to get the first overall pick or a high draft pick. I don't like that. As a massive NHL fan as well, I've seen the Buffalo Sabres do it. They're still crap. They still haven't got back to the playoffs. They've been crap for forever, it seems. Toronto as well, they did a tank. And they had to change the draft lottery rules because of those two teams tanking to try and tank for McDavid and Eichel and Matthews and something over several seasons of deliberately playing badly to try and get the best available youth talent. It's not a good look when you know that the team being put out to play is 9 times out of 10 going to lose. And it's not a good look when an organisation is basically telling the coach who they can and can't select, or a general manager or a director of performance saying, yeah, we want to put the worst team possible out on the field. So you either put a very inexperienced team out or a team with some journeymen out and they're bad. Like Western Suburb Magpies bad, or even the Canterbury Bulldogs this season bad. Yeah, it's not a good look if you're a fan of that team or if you're a fan of competition. So there has to be protections in place to avoid that, and that's something that the Australian Rugby League Commission has to think long and hard about. Yes, I will admit, obviously the league is very competitive, but we see so many salary cap breaches on a regular, frequent basis, it's almost embarrassing. There are other things I think the NRL needs to take stock of. There's been a lot of rule changes in the last 2 seasons, a lot of them mid-season as well, and I think there needs to be a period of stability. We've obviously got the Dolphins coming in the season after next. I think that the league needs to get to 18 teams, stabilise that. An odd team league is an absolute headache to fixture because that means every match day weekend a team has a bye week. How that will affect state of origin mid-season as well, when there normally is that the 3 bye weeks, for teams. How would that affect the current situation with fixturing? There are fans' concerns that, yeah, I think an 18-team league is perfect, personally. It's a good round number. 16-team league, I think, again, would have keeping it 16. But they're going for an odd number league for a couple of seasons. That is going to be not great long term, quite frankly. So there's a concern at diluting the talent pool. Best way in order to increase the talent pool is allow a bit of stabilisation. Allow these new rules that have been brought in to stabilise. Let's look at the data that comes back, or data, if you are Australian or North American. One of the most infuriating mispronunciations of words. Jokes aside, I think there needs to be a review process of how these new rules are implemented. There needs to be, an emphasis on refereeing integrity, because we've seen issues with the bunker, we've seen issues with consistency of refereeing as well, with a lot of missed calls, a lot of poor calls that have affected some games. So we need to have a bit more stability there. I think the NRL needs to roll back on the rule changes a little bit. I'm in favour of the changes they brought in. I am. But they've done it so fast and so quickly and reacting to previous rule changes that there just needs to be a little bit of a bedding in period, a calming down period. So the NRL's got a lot of things going on. Expansion, rule change, implementation. And I do think that they need to improve the level of the game in the territories and states that don't have NRL teams at this current time, and consider going back to Adelaide or back to Perth, or maybe a second team in New Zealand, COVID notwithstanding, because obviously the Warriors have basically played in Australia constantly for the last 2 seasons, and what actually happens with that, because that's costing the game money hosting the Warriors away from home. And of course the TV deal in place with Sky New Zealand, that has to come up for debate. Will the Warriors end up being permanently relocated to Australia? That's another question. Could the team permanently relocate, name change, location change? The NRL has to be brave in taking the fight to the AFL. They've tried that with the Storm, and while the Storm have been successful on the field as a first grade team, where is the grassroots growth in Victoria? So there's a lot of things on the NRL's table right now, and in order for the draft system to be truly effective, they need to get the teams on board. They need to change the administrative and structures away from the game in order for that to happen. I'm not sure how the teams are going to feel because they've invested a lot of money in their youth setups, in their recruitment setups, in their player development programs. Some more successfully than others, admittedly, and they have their catchment areas. So changing that all of a sudden would actually hamper some teams that have shown real growth in recent years, such as Penrith, such as Gold Coast in youth development. It may benefit other teams, or other teams may stay mediocre, like the West Tigers, because having a draft system is one thing, or having a salary cap system is one thing, or whatever. But if the team is badly run off the field, so West Tigers is the example I'm going to use, and mediocre on the field for a lengthy period of time, it doesn't matter if you've got a draft system or a salary cap or no salary cap, or you try and encourage youth development if the team off the field is badly run. If the team on the field is generally just in a rebuild, like Canterbury, for example, or Brisbane, but it was well run off the field financially, youth recruitment, player development, it's a different story. But whatever the case, there's a lot of things that need to happen before a draft can actually work effectively, even though the salary cap is set up for a draft system. There are so many things that the NRL would have to delegate upwards to the Australian Rugby League Commission to do. I think it's the it's the ARLC's job, I believe, to work with the draft system and work with all concerned parties. That also includes Queensland and New South Wales rugby leagues. Absolutely, because they're the guys who really govern, state of origin, country football, which has got its own problems. So there's a lot of stakeholders in this, and I don't think it can happen overnight, and it's going to be a long process. And I think the discussions will continue. This is something that's been discussed before. It's an interesting discussion point. I'm not sure fans are in favour of it as things currently stand. Obviously, in a perfect world, with the way the salary cap is structured, it would be, but I think the club structures that are currently in place and the investment the clubs have put in over a lengthy period of time in their youth policies and player development policies and pathways, you've got to completely break that. And money talks, especially in a sport like rugby league, which is very niche. There's only a few markets that it's very popular in. It's not as wealthy globally as other sports. It doesn't have that international imprint, especially with the World Cup being delayed by a year, like rugby union, a key rival. When it comes to the Australian dollar, when it comes to the British pound as well, and fans buying in, it doesn't have the same global appeal as rugby union. Domestically, the AFL has more teams, a better national imprint, so it's got a lot of challenges for this to work. But the AFL has successfully implemented and got the teams on board with the draft system. And guess what? It's those state and territory leagues that are the level below the AFL that have also got some pretty good quality, where you can draft players from and then send players down for a development period after they've been drafted to develop their skills, get game time, and then bring them up as required into the first grade team. The NRL doesn't have that. So there's a lot to consider. Bring back reserve grade on a full-time basis. There's a lot to consider there. But thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.